fact, I'm working at the conference office.
Or
So
really?
I'm the Young Adult Ministries Director for the Georgia Cumberland Conference.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And when I left GCA Church in 2014, I went there as the Associate Youth Director for Young Adult Ministries. But they changed my job description 3 times in 4 years. And so after they finally settled on what they really wanted, they've made a whole new department for Young Adult Ministries, so I'm now the Director of Young Adult Ministries and Adventist Christian Fellowship, which is our ministry to Adventist students on public university campuses. So I'm currently coordinating ministry on 13 different public university campuses.
Okay.
All over the state of Georgia and eastern Tennessee. So that's why I'm tired, not retired.
Now, are you retirement age and you're just working extra?
I could be there.
That's what I figured. Okay.
I'm not quite, for the government's sake, I have to go a few more. But,
Perfect.
But I'm getting there. So I turned 65 last year. I'll turn 66 this year.
Wonderful.
So, but I haven't had a whole lot to do with the local church here for quite some time. The first 4 or 5 years, simply because I wanted to stay out of Greg Hudson's way, and because having been the former senior pastor for 15 years, people would come. I said, "No, I'm not your pastor anymore," and so I purposely drew back. This is the year I've decided in 2024, if I'm available. I told the Lord this. I said, if somebody from the local church calls and wants me to do something, if I'm available, I'm gonna do it.
Thank you.
So. If I'm available, Heidi. So I still live here in Calhoun. Matter of fact, over by the cemetery.
Yep.
Yes.
So I am really cranking. So my ministry has been about having division, because when I started in youth ministry 42 years ago, there was really no such thing in the Adventist church. And so you either figure out how to vision and or set a course, or you sit there and twiddle your thumbs going, what am I supposed to do? And there's no lack of people who will tell you what you should do, but it's always different directions. So when I got to GCA in 1999, I was the 5th pastor in 6 years.
Oh, wow.
GCA was at a very unstable time in its development. Matter of fact, they had changed principals about 4 times too.
Wow.
Or 5 in the previous 5-6 years. The principal that was here when I got here had been here for 2 years. My first year was his 3rd year, and then he was gone. So it was a rocky road. And so when I came into the church, we met in the chapel back then. I got to actually build that church.
Awesome.
And if you want to know about that building, I can tell you more about that building if you ever want to know. I've probably forgotten more about it than you'd want to know. But anyway, so we had to vision what we were going to do here in order to change the culture. Because the culture when I got here was the kids didn't sing, none of them. I'd play my guitar and they would look at me like, what are you doing? I'd start singing, they'd look at me like, now, as you know, the culture's not that way now.
Yeah.
Right.
Very much a music culture. So there was that. The adults of the church basically treated the students like saying, okay, you sit there and watch what we're doing, and when you're old enough, maybe you can do this too. We all know the problem with that. They're not going to be here if you make them wait that long. And so we changed the culture to be more student-oriented and so forth, but we had to do that through visioning. After I left here, the first 4 years, before they changed my job description the 3rd time, I was actually, part of my job description was coaching churches in the process of culture change, helping them vision and revision where they were headed. So the material you're going to see now, it goes way beyond the master guide stuff. I hope that's okay.
Sure.
And it actually will have the exact same principles that take you into how to vision and how to see where you want to lead people. And so while it says church and or organization, it'll say that sometimes in here, you can just read in there your Pathfinder clubs or whatever. So having said that, one of the key things that the Pathfinders is about, the church is about, is helping safely transfer the church into the hands of the next generation.
Amen.
If we don't do that, we failed as disciples.
Mm-hmm.
All the way through Scripture is talking about how we need to be able to hand off our discipleship to another generation and become disciple-making disciples and create that whole thing that goes. So at the basis of whatever I do with church and with any of our organizations is the idea is how can you safely transfer the church into the hands of the next generation? And that, a lot of things in that one line.
Mm-hmm.
The word safely.
Safely.
Some people think that what you do is, well, we need to have the kids involved and just throw them in there and back off and go, well, let's see. And we'll wait for them to fail, and when they fail, we can say, see, told you. And then they take over again.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what we're talking about. Transfer means to release and move the locus of control from the adults to the students. It's actually generationally handing it down. And to do that, you have to train, which means you've got to begin. So the whole purpose of Pathfinders and the whole Master Guide program, the TLTs, the whole thing is to be able to transfer leadership, develop leadership. And so we're gonna do that. So tonight, in this session, we're going to cover the following: the power of vision, how often should you revision, steps to visioning for your church and or organization, and visioning with students in mind.
That's Augusta.
Huh?
That's Augusta, Georgia.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
I coached that church
Did you?
for a year.
Okay, I used to live there.
It's a great church. I did the engaged coaching process. They got their little sign back there in the back. So that's quite a few years ago. I also did Valdosta, I did Columbus, I did Appleton, I did a whole bunch of churches around the conference. And so what you're going to get here is what I gave their boards. So, and more. The power of vision. Vision helps you determine where you're headed, allows you to plot the course, gives you a way to track progress, gives you an end game to shoot for. The whole idea of vision is setting a picture in the minds of your people that says, oh, we can do this together. If you don't set that picture, everybody comes up with ideas. And David, you know this to be true, because what happens is in lieu of feeling like they're connected, I mean, you might be doing all kind of great stuff, but if they don't feel connected, they're going to come to you and say, you know what we should do. You ever had that happen? Pastor, what you should really be doing here is. And the same thing happens at the Pathfinder Club level, is that if the director doesn't really take leadership and cast the vision, you leave yourself with a backwater of people that will try to take up and cast their own vision for you. The problem with that, as you quickly find out, is everybody's vision is different. And so the first place to start with vision is prayer. As you start praying, asking God to send you the vision that He wants for your organization, for your church, you can begin to develop that vision. So, how often should a church revision in order to assure they continue moving forward? And I would say Pathfinder Clubs had half this. Yeah. But the church, every 5 years. If you're not revisioning every 5 years, you're losing momentum, and your people will lag, and people begin to come in and tell you what to do. And everybody begins to pull their own direction. So they either tell you what to do, or they'll pull their own direction, or they'll do both, which is maddening. 2-year visions tend to be too short to accomplish everything that a church needs to do. Now, 2.5-year visions, 2 years, 2.5, great for Pathfinder Clubs.
Right.
Okay? A 7 to 10-year vision tends to be perceived as never ending. And so people go, so 5 years gives you enough time to vision, to track, to evaluate, and then revision. And if you can revision every 5 years as a church, then you begin to move the church forward. Every 5 years that I was here 15 years, we did 3 different revisioning sessions, and that kept the whole thing moving, and it kept the culture changing. It took 6 years to change the culture from what it was to what it is now, and it just continued then to get healthier and healthier. So you're welcome, David. So what are the steps? always start with the why. Why do you do what you do? Boil down the unique reason that your church has for existing. Now, I'll go into a church and I'll say, okay, the blank church exists to what? Why are you here? And I'll get things like to preach the three angels' message, the everlasting gospel, three angels' message to the world. And I'll go, stop it, you're not even doing that here. Let's get real. Why do you exist apart from the other Adventist churches in town?
Right.
Like when you're in Chattanooga and you got 23 more, and or 2 in this town and 3 or 4 more close by. And so if you don't start with the why you exist, you won't have the purpose and direction you need. So why does your Pathfinder organization exist separate from other Pathfinder organizations?
Right.
Oh.
You can do the Pathfinder pledge and law all you want, but it doesn't set direction for your club. And so visioning where you want to move your club, where would you like to be? Where would you like to be in 2 years, in 3 years? What are your settings? And we're going to walk all the way through that. But if you don't have that, then what happens is you begin to lose focus, and all you're trying to do is accomplish the checklists. And when you go back to the checklist, people lose excitement. So if all you're doing is trying to check off the things that the conference says you need to check off, which is a whole lot of
There's
that.
a lot of things.
A lot of
Just
that.
admit it.
Yes, I know. That's one of the reasons why I don't do Pathfinder ministry. There's so many things to check
So
off.
many things.
Trust me, I went on plenty of Pathfinder campouts, and I had to smack the sides of giggling girls' tents too many times.
Perfect.
Stop it, guys. I'm not kidding you. So, I'm not playing this time. But always start with why. Don't be vague and cliche. We're going to preach the everlasting gospel to all the world, proclaim the third message. Vague and cliche never move anyone to do things differently.
Oh.
You can say, oh, we are the Pathfinder strong, and do the whole line. And part of the problem that we have with Pathfinders in the Adventist church is that we've gotten too cliche.
Yeah.
We've gotten too, and those Pathfinder clubs that really shine are those that have actually got a purpose that they have determined, and they have visioned that for their people. Okay, yeah, we're going to do that, but this is really the direction we're headed. In order to do that, we're going to do it this way. And so as they vision this thing, that Pathfinder club begins to take off. And as they take off, you find people saying, oh, wow, we want to be part of that. Now, when I got here to GCA, we had people that thought we should go this way or that way, and as I prayed about it, I took 6 months to pray about the vision before we said it. And once we said it, we had people that just really couldn't tolerate it. And so we actually ended up with people leaving, and you'll freak out. People always freak out when somebody leaves. Oh, we can't leave. Because we only had 32 giving units in the church when I got here.
Oh, goodness.
11 families left,
Oh, my goodness.
which took us down to 21 giving units. And we were trying to do ministry for 250 students. And everybody was freaking out. I said, don't freak out. When you set a new vision, the Lord will replace those people with people who want to be part of your vision, not fight your vision.
So true.
And so when that happened, suddenly the whole rest of the church got behind the vision, and they lifted the vision, and things began to move forward. Now again, it took 6 years to change the culture, but we started with why. Why are we here? Now, most people, it would seem logical to me, would say, oh, we're on a boarding school campus. It should have something to do with that.
You think?
But when we begin to vision that way, there are people, no, we can't do that. We need to, and we need to have a community service center out here, because they were into competitive ministry. This is the danger we have with Pathfinders. You go to camporees and
Oh
suddenly
my
you see
goodness.
a real snazzy place, and ooh, it's competitive.
Uh-huh.
We're not competitive ministry, we're complementary ministry. And I had to get the Calhoun church to see that and the GCA church to see that, because they had been in competition for years.
Sure.
And some of the pastors that had been at Calhoun church bought into that and were trying to outdo it. That's one of the reasons, this is a long backstory and I won't go to it, that's one of the reasons why they're 2 miles away. Real story. Instead of on the property that the conference bought for them over by the conference office on the other side of town. But we won't go there. Go over it. All right, so, but when you begin to look at competitive ministry versus complementary ministry, then the edge starts taking on. And so I watch this every Pathfinder camp you've ever been to. It's like, ooh, they got drums. We need to get drums.
That is why we have drums.
Yeah, see?
Or working on it.
Or, ooh, they got really cool hats. Can we get really cool hats like that? Ooh, they got really, and we're always looking around. What do they got? And you go to Oshkosh, now Gillette, and it gets worse. And so when you're visioning, you're not visioning for them and impressing other clubs. You're visioning what God wants you to do with the kids that He's put in your care. That make sense?
Yep.
So, after the why, move to the who. To whom are you seeking to minister? You've got to narrow this down for yourself. And to say, these are the people that we are about ministering to. And it actually helps to write that out. When I wrote it out for my church board here at GCA and said, we're here for the students, guess what I heard? Oh, good. No. I heard, what about us? So, what about you? And after the third board meeting where I heard, what about us? I said, well, hold on. Let me ask you a question. What do you mean, what about us, first of all? Well, who's going to feed us and who's going to... Hold it, time out. Who feeds me? Oh, well, you're the pastor. We would expect that you'd feed yourself. Oh, good. Okay, we got something we can land on there. That's good. But I said, in the real world, in the practical, pragmatic, physical world, if we have a person who is 5 years of age not feeding themselves, we would call that severely developmentally delayed. Now, in my day, we called it retarded. Back in the old days before political correctness came along. So if you're telling me you've been in the church longer than 5 years, and you're not feeding yourself, you are severely spiritually developmentally delayed, or spiritually retarded. If you can't feed, I said, let's take this and run down another path with it, okay? Let's say that we said, okay, you only get one meal a week because you're expecting me to feed you. So the only meal you get is Sabbath. We're going to do a big potluck every Sabbath. You can come in and take as much as you want, but you can only eat on Sabbath. You with me? They're going, I don't know about eating on Sabbath, that's all, you know. No, you can eat all you want on Sabbath. All day Sabbath, just gorge. So you come to the potluck, you load up 3 plates, you crank that, and you waddle out. You're about to barf because you're so full, you're going, but I got to make it till next Sabbath. And you walk out thinking, oh man, and by Sunday morning, what's happened?
You're hungry again.
You start to get hungry, but you know, you promised. So you can have, we decided, okay, you can have crackers and you can have water till next Sabbath, but that's it. Crackers and water. And so you nibble on your crackers, sometimes you gorge on your crackers, but you drink your water and you keep trying to make it through the week. What happens by next Sabbath? You come to the potluck. You load up 2 plates. Can you eat it all? Why?
Your stomach shrunk.
Your stomach shrunk. You no longer have the capacity to eat what you were able to eat. And the same thing is true in the spiritual realm. When you don't eat but 1 meal a week, and you snack on a little verse and a little thing, a little bread and water there, you make it through the week that way. When you get done, your spiritual capacity has shrunk. So you come back the next Sabbath, and you can't take as much in. You just ruined your spiritual appetite. And if that goes on week after week after week, guess what? If you're only relying on me to feed you, you just starve spiritually. No matter what a good spread I put on. So who do you seek to minister? Who's your primary audience? Who are you trying to win? What people groups live in close proximity to your church? Well, you can figure that out right here pretty quick. Key question, would your community miss you if your church or organization ceased to exist today and someone removed the road sign pointing out your church? Now, being back here in the woods, most of them wouldn't miss us because we're not involved in our community. One of the things that Pathfinders can do is help the church be involved in the community. Now, do you think that Walter Prentup knows who we are?
Who?
Walter Prentup? You know Walter? He's the guy that's in charge
Oh,
of
the
the
cemetery
cemetery.
guy. Yeah, yeah.
He knows
Mr.
we
Walter.
exist.
He does.
Oh,
And he would
absolutely.
miss us if we weren't,
Yes.
Yeah.
because we've done it for 20 years.
Yeah.
And Walter now says, man, you guys are the best church in town.
He does. Yeah.
He loves us.
Gets tears in his eyes.
And every
Thank you
time,
so much for
every time. Thank you so much.
that. Yeah.
And he carries that load pretty much by himself. But how many other people would miss us
Mm.
if we weren't here? One of the things that Pathfinders can do is help with this particular thing right here. Let's keep going. So steps to visioning. Next is the what. What niche is God calling your church to fill, your organization to fill? Ask yourself how you could best minister to that people group. He's asked you to minister to a niche of children and teens in a way that nobody else can. Do you know that when I go to public universities and I talk to Adventist kids, we have tons of them all over. I'll take everyone, I do a spring tour every year, and I do about 3,000 miles in 4 weeks, which is really exciting. And fortunately, we haven't gotten to that point now. I wouldn't be here this week. But one of the things I ask them is, what's the most significant thing the church did for you growing up? And the number one answer, 90% of the time, Pathfinders.
Really.
And these are kids that are on public university campuses for whatever reason, but they say Pathfinders.
Wow.
And I say, well, are you still involved? No,
Mm-mm.
outgrew it. Right? Just, my Pathfinder Club just kind of went downhill. They did the status quo. And that's why you want to revision this thing. If you don't ask yourself the question, how can you best minister to that people group? Your church is destined to simply tread water and mark time. That's your Pathfinder group. It's going to tread water and mark time.
Mm.
You'll go to all the things.
Mhm.
You'll go through the complete calendar. You'll stay very, very busy.
Mhm.
But all you're doing is marking time. You're not really making progress and building leaders. And that's your key. Okay? Now followed by the how. Coming to the how questions is determined by how well you answer the why, who, and what questions. If you've answered them well, then the how will almost come naturally. But as you take your team through, and by the way, I did bring this all in a little handout that I'll give to you at the end, because I don't want you cheating.
Fine.
So here's another key thought. Before you jump straight to the strategies, take your why, who, what, and how, and seek to articulate them in a short, concise, and memorable vision statement. Now, people do a lot of weird things with vision statements, and I've been doing this for a long time. And vision statements, there are some people that will actually take this and they try to come up with a vision statement that includes everybody and everything in the world.
Mhm.
And the vision statement gets so long and so complex, they can't even remember it, much less act on it. A vision statement is what drives you. It should drive your church. It should be the thing that you go back to. And while the methodologies can change, the vision statement stays the same. So you want to make sure you do this well. And the way to do that is, how does one go about developing that? The blank church or organization exists to blank. It's a real simple way to do that. So, the Cherokee Pathfinder Club, the Collegedale Pathfinder Club exists to what? Now, if you say, to make sure we check off all the boxes for the conference, you've missed the point. If you're saying we're going to develop leaders, or we're developing children into true disciples, or, you know, those kind of things, as you develop young families, you can work through this whole thing. But if you don't answer that last blank there, then what happens is you're marking time, treading water. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So this is my vision starter pack right there. See that? I threw that in for free. So when we were trying to figure out the GCA church, and I knew you guys would appreciate this, we said the GCA church family exists to capture the hearts and minds of young people and develop them into fully devoted disciples of Jesus. Now, when I wrote this, it was not true. First of all, the family was torn apart. It wasn't a family. I started using family ideologies and family language to help bring the different, because you got 3 churches in one here. This is a hard church to pastor. And David can agree or disagree, but I mean, it might be easier now, but it wasn't then. Because we're looking at the faculty, the community, and the students. There's 3 different individual congregations under one roof. And they all have competing ideologies and competing wants and needs. And so if you don't, and the only thing I could think of that actually made this work was to use a family motif. Because when you think about family at Thanksgiving, everybody has a seat at the table. Now that's changing too. I mean, that's going to go the way with this whole new generation because nobody eats at the table, they watch football and, you know. But when you look at that whole thing, and let's take this mission statement apart, is that memorable? Is it actionable?
Yes.
Yep.
So what you want is memorable and actionable. You want to be able to drive your ministry with this thing. So when you look at the GCA church family exists to capture the hearts and minds of young people, there's your first thing. The church family, that is the community, the faculty, and even the students, exists to capture the hearts and minds of young people for who? Well, there goes the neighborhood.
Good to see you, Pastor.
Love you too, Doctor. All right,
Forgot.
so when we look at that, it has to be memorable, actionable. And so, capture the hearts and minds of young people for Christ, and then to develop them. So there's 2 things. One is capturing them, one is developing them. Into what? Disciple-making disciples. That's what a fully devoted disciple is. It's a person. So we bring them full circle. So if you're looking at the vision statement, then you can then begin to say, okay, what are the ways, as you look at the revisioning process, what are the ways that we're capturing their hearts and minds, and what are the ways that we're actually developing them? And so that vision statement has driven the church for over 20 years now. So go back and write a vision statement from that unique reason for existing, including what your church, your organization needs to accomplish. And as you do that, you can make it short, memorable, and actionable, and that's going to drive your thing forward. So steps to visioning. Is it actionable? Now contrast that to proclaim the everlasting gospel of the 3rd angel's message to the world. That's memorable, but is it actionable? What does that mean? Any ideas? How does that drive action? Well, preach. That's the only action.
I was going to say, I certainly.
And what do most people do when they see that word? Well, I'm not a preacher, so I'm out. It's up to you, David.
Okay.
And so it's not actionable for the rest of the congregation. They then get an out, and they go, oh, well, preach. That's not me. I don't preach. That's the pastor. So I'm out of this one. So while it sounds good, your average church member will ask, what does that mean? Well, actually, they don't ask. That's the problem.
Right.
They don't ask anything. They go, oh, okay,
Oh, okay.
we'll just do that. And so when that happens, your church just treads water. Or your organization treads water. So when you look at your Pathfinder organization, why you exist, those unique reasons, then you got to make it actionable. So memorable, actionable, those 2 things are key. Here's another key thought. Movement in the church, and therefore growth, comes when we make things actionable. That is, something the church organization is able to act on. People want to get to work and do something meaningful for the sake of the kingdom. Within your Pathfinder organization, the same exact thing is there. You have people that will come and say, well, yeah, I'll help. And then if you don't ever give them a job, what do?
What?
Well, I guess they don't need me. And nobody stays very long where they're not wanted or needed.
Sure.
If you don't believe me, just go to your spouse's Christmas party. Every time I go to my wife's Christmas party, I don't feel wanted or needed. They all gather a little thing, and they all start talking, and once the food is done, I'm done, you know? So we started taking 2 cars. Now, she can come to my Christmas party, and she knows a lot of people from church that are there, and so she'll sit and talk to them. I go to her, I don't know anybody at Gordon. I mean, I know a few people, but in her home health care section,
Oh, it's true.
they're all over the place. They don't even work together during the day. They have meetings once a week.
Sure.
I go to their party, it's like, okay, I'm done with order, I can't put any more in. And they're all talking, and they care less whether I'm there or not. That's what happens when your organization doesn't engage those people that have even volunteered. And so if you're gonna move this thing and make it actionable, you've got to make sure that you're ready to engage people. To say, here's what I need you to do. Because then it makes it personal, and oh, well, I can do that. And so we look at this thing called spiritual gifting, and that can actually help drive the organization forward. If I'm plugging people in on stuff that they feel like they can do, then suddenly they go, oh. Now if I take somebody who's an introvert and say, okay, I want you to be deputy director, they're like, oh, I think I'm gonna go to prayer ministries. I can do that. So the idea is, how do you take where people are and move them to where you want them to be? If I can paint a vision of what my church or my organization is about, and I can articulate it well, usually people begin getting on board because they can see where they will fit. And getting people to see where they fit is the biggest thing you've got to do, is help them understand this is your piece, this is where you fit. This is where things actually begin to work. And if everybody does their little bit, guess what? The pieces begin to come together. And they're all relating back to your vision. They look at the vision and say, well, I can help by doing this. Sometimes you have to get them to say, what would you like to do? Other times you say, you know, I've noticed you're really good at this. Could you help us by doing? And many times people will just wait until somebody says that. Now, they might go one step and say, well, yeah, I'll help with Pathfinders this year. You go, okay, great, what'd you like to do?
It's so hard, yeah. What do you want to do? I don't know.
I don't know. Now, that's as opposed to the 83-year-old woman who came to me as a youth pastor, and she said, okay, Pastor, I'm going to work with the youth.
Oh, man.
Okay. And then she said, but I don't do lock-ins.
She's 83.
I don't drive them anywhere. Good.
Fair.
I'm not cooking for anybody. I'm not teaching Sabbath school. I'm not, and she went down about 10 things she wasn't going to do, and what's my natural question?
What do you want to do?
I said, well, what are you? She's, I'm going to be the Sabbath school leader.
Oh.
Okay, and here's what you're going to do for me, Pastor. I want you to get a picture of every kid in the youth group and put their name and their birth date on it. I will make sure that every one of them gets a card of their birthday. I'll make sure that I'm here to greet them every Sabbath. I'll make sure. She got to the point where she would be stalling off Sabbath school because she's still talking, and the kids wanted to talk to her. This is not a medical. Yeah, I don't know if the lines were still painted on the wall when you got there or not. The kids came up with the idea saying, well, let's just paint, how they have in a prison, the lines, and 5 foot, 6 foot lines. And then they held a little board with their name, and their number was actually their birth date without the height and slashes in there. And they'd hold it like this, and they'd hold it like this. So we did two Polaroid pictures of each. Actually, we did 4 because I put one copy on the bulletin board in the room. And then we gave her a scrapbook of all of them. The kids thought that was really cool. You didn't have a picture of it.
So cute.
Yeah. And so did that for years. She came every Sabbath. She was there, and it got to the point where she would have a whole group of kids just crowded around her. Hey, I know your mom went in for surgery last night. I prayed. How's she doing? hey, I know your brother was sick. Is he doing better? How was your test? Did that go okay? We prayed for that all this last week. And I'd say, we need to get started. Step. We're not done yet, Pastor. Just wait.
Yes, ma'am.
When she died, I think she was 86 or 87. When she died, the kids came out of the woodwork for her funeral. Deeply involved, and it was amazing to watch as she touched their lives. But she didn't do any of this stuff. So sometimes you say, okay, what would you like to do? Sometimes they'll go, I don't know, what do you want to do?
Mhm.
Traditionally, that's more what you get. I don't know. What do you want me to do?
Work with kids.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just here. So, can you teach honors? No.
Right?
Can you go on camp house?
Oh, I don't
Can't-
care.
No, on camp house. I'll sleep on the ground. No, do that. Can you cook? I'm a bad cook. So what can you do? So sometimes asking, say, here's the areas that we need. I've even listed on sheets, here's what you need. And some people will say, oh, well, I could do that.
Mhm.
I had some people that all they did was for our youth group, they just did outings. They said, well, I got a boat, I've got a van, I'll take the kids and I'll ski them. Great,
Right.
let's go.
Yep.
And that's the only time they were involved in the youth group. But as you begin with this vision that says we're going to take this to the next level, and you articulate the vision well, people begin to buy into the vision and they say, where do I fit? Sometimes you have to help them fit, other times they'll tell you where they fit. But when they see where they fit and can contribute in a meaningful way, there's no stopping them. Things begin to just mushroom. It begins to grow. Spend time massaging the vision statement with your elders first, or your I told you this is for churches, but
Staff.
with your staff. And finally, have it voted at all the various levels. Once it's voted, make it the foundation of your working documents and plans. So we go from there to how do you develop statements of intent? Now, when you start looking at actionable, if you want to move things along, we often plan a lot of stuff, we put them in the calendars, we get all this great, it's really good, and then we don't do anything. Or we cancel. One of the worst things you can do is put something on a calendar, especially with kids, and cancel it.
Mhm.
Because once you cancel it 3 times, they go, well, we don't know what's going to happen.
Mm.
It's on the calendar, but who knows what's going to happen. Yeah, do less stuff and make sure it's done and done well. Then trying to fill your calendar with a great plan and do none of it, because then it's worthless. But the next step after you vision to make this thing come to life is looking at statements of intent. Statements of intent. Spend time talking to your top 3 influencers in your organization. You know who they are. And see what they think is important to address. Take surveys, ask questions, take lots of notes. I sat down one-on-one with all the elders of this church when I first got here. Took them all out to lunch one at a time, and I asked them, what do you think needs to happen here? That's how I helped capture the vision. And then the statements of intent. I'm going to show you the ones that we developed here. But we wrote those statements of intent in the present tense so you can paint a picture with words that will allow them to grow into the vision. In other words, none of the things that we wrote of our statements of intent were true at the time we wrote them. They were written as if they were true, but it was a picture I wanted them to grow into. And when we started, we looked at, okay, what are the top 2 statements of intent to be addressed in year 1, then move to the next ones that need to be addressed in year 2, and then year 3, and so on. So what would statements of intent look like? Thank you for asking. Here we go. So in the year 2000, I wrote statements of intent for Georgia Carmel Academy Church for the year 2005. Now, we put the vision statement right at the top. Why would we do that? To continue to keep it memorable, actionable. It's there in front of them. The GCA church family exists to capture hearts and minds of young people and develop and fully devoted disciples of Jesus. We actually put it on plaques and had it all over the church at one time. But statements of intent for the year 2005. In the statements of intent, I've chosen to paint a picture of the future by using present tense. So, 1, and none of these, by the way, none of them were true. At all. It was a shambles. Okay? We have an exciting, ongoing, and fully staffed children's ministry that meets the needs of our children, appeals to new families that live in the community, as well as the non-Adventist guests that visit frequently. I didn't know from week to week if we were going to have any children's Sabbath school. We were still in the chapel. There were times, especially at home leave, when people would say, well, you know, I'd go down there and we'd have a guest that showed up. I'd take their kid down to Sabbath school and there's nobody there. You go, well, I'll take you out and tell you stories. Then I call the people who were supposed to, well, you know, we called around and we knew they were going to be gone for home leave, and then we're going to be gone for home leave, and these people were going, so we just said, you don't need to have it. So we had to go from that to making sure that something happened, even on home leaves, all the time. Number 2, Academy students are plugged in and working at all levels of church organization and are continually being discipled and trained to be more spiritually effective leaders, as well as how to reach out to the community. Do you see how these are serving that? Okay? Again, Academy students weren't plugged in. When I first got here in '99, the church members basically did everything and said in their actions, just sit there and wait when you're old enough to do this. Now, if you look at the GCA church today, would you say this is more or less, more true or not true?
It's more true.
Yeah.
They're doing it, yeah.
Now, we probably have to go back and say, working at all levels of church organization. Are they really at all levels of church organization? I don't know. That's where you, as you revision, you go back and look at those different statements. Our worship service is a relevant, fresh, and joyous experience aimed at challenging and discipling worshipers. Is that true now?
Yes.
Yeah. When I got here, my first Sabbath was horrible. I mean, the announcements went 45 minutes.
No way.
45 minutes. And the guy doing the announcements, I think, fell asleep twice in the middle of them.
This is with the student body there, or?
This little student body was there.
No.
And it was like, it's a joy to be here in the Lord's house today. That only happened one Sabbath. The next Sabbath, I had all the announcements on the screen, and we only highlighted 3 up front, and we moved beyond that. The kids were like, wow, we got out of church early because we got out the announcement time. But it wasn't relevant, it wasn't fresh, it wasn't joyous. Matter of fact, they didn't have any guitars on the stage. It was all piano or organ. I did not know this, but I was the first one that ever played a guitar during church at GCA. And I was asked to lead praise time one Sabbath, and so I brought my guitar and I had an acoustic electric, I plugged it in, had it sitting on the stand, and people came out of adult Sabbath schools, walked into the chapel, and they're looking up there,
What is that?
rebel. Whose guitars?
Help music.
And then we started, I stepped out behind the little wing there, and I put my guitar on, and you see him going, it's a new pastor. And I had people at the door say, well, that wasn't as bad as I thought. I guess that's a compliment, I don't know. I took it that way. It wasn't relevant, it wasn't fresh, it wasn't joyous. And so, changing that. Now, we wrote this in 2000, when it wasn't that way. But by 2005, it was. That's because Dr. Gerard had gotten here and changed everything. It was a lot better. Here's the last ones. He helped me actually work through a lot of this stuff. We went through. The Academy Church has developed an exciting non-traditional evangelistic plan to accompany our traditional evangelism in order to reach their non-Christian neighbors and help them acquire a relationship with Jesus. Faculty, community, and Academy students, there's those 3 entities we're talking about, delight in working and playing together and have created an environment that is joyful and appealing to the guests that are regularly being invited to join us. Nobody would join us at that time when we wrote this.
This was a 5-year plan?
This was a 5-year. And the faculty, community, and academy students didn't even like being around each other at that point in time.
Awesome.
The faculty would say, I've been with them all week. I don't need to be with them again on Sabbath. And they would bolt over to Calhoun Church or anywhere they could go. And the academy students didn't really like the faculty hanging over their heads anyway. So and the community people were almost non-existent at that point because we had so many families that left during that whole split. We have a large community base that's committed to actively supporting the vision and ministry of GCA Church, both financially and through spiritual gifts. Yeah, we had 21 giving units. And 17 of those were faculty members. Do we have a large community base? No. Do we have a large community base now?
Could be larger, I think.
It could be larger, but it's still much larger than that.
Yes.
Point is, and by the way, this is a very important point for an academy church because there is a balance that has to be maintained. Most academies have got one of two types of churches. Either it's all students and faculty and nobody else is there.
Yep.
Or the community has long since taken over
Yep.
and the kids are pushed to the side. I didn't want that to happen here. So as we looked at visioning, we wanted to make sure that that stayed in balance. And so it's hard work. And I can tell you that Dr. Gerard, Dr. Steele and I met every Friday morning for, what, 13 years?
Oh my.
Something like that?
About longer than that.
It did feel longer. Yeah. But that was part of that whole thing is how do we balance the needs of the students in the academy with the needs of the community and work through those kind of things to continue the vision forward. And so that's what, we worship in a roomy, attractive new church facility designed to lead all that enter the foot of the cross.
So in 5 years, you're gonna have a church, right?
So we had no church, we were in the chapel. Now, I don't know if you've noticed this, but there are about 80 or 90 crosses in that church. They're very subtle. The architect actually took this when he began drawing the plans, and he tucked them in everywhere. I didn't even see them all at first. Every window over there is a cross. Did you know that? If you look at the doors going into the sanctuary, it's a little cross on them. If you look at the windows along the sides, if they're raised up, there's a cross. They have the little things inside the windows. He took that thing to the max. But we didn't do it, but we opened our doors, by the way, November 5 of 2005. So by visioning this stuff ahead, you get people to live into that and walk into that vision. And as you do that, it gives you direction and a sense of purpose. And this is, everybody says, okay, this is where we're going. And when everybody gets on the same page and is actionable, it begins to move forward. We're actively challenging each other to higher levels of personal spirituality, evangelism, and accountability to use the small groups. That one never got off the ground. We tried and tried and tried to do small groups, and nobody would do that. Because Adventists are just averse to small groups for some reason. I don't know why. But you win some, you lose some, and some get rained down. That got rained down. We consistently strive to nurture every member as we attend to the needs of each other. And we do that pretty well. But that's the first 5-year plan. Now, we did one for 2000, because we built the church in 2005, 2011 was the next one, then we did one for 2016. But the idea, then after you write your statements of intent, develop your strategies to address your top 2 statements of intent, and a timeline to implement them. This is where we fail. We don't put timelines on stuff. Say, okay, when is this going to happen? When are we going to, but don't move so quickly you'll leave your church or your organization behind, but don't move so slowly that all lose hope of anything ever happening. Move on to your next statement of intent and develop strategies and put them into place. So what we had to do was we had to say, okay, when we're looking at these statements of intent, which of those do we want to put at the top? Well, at the very top, we did this one. And we began to work on that so that within the first 2 years, we developed Sabbath school programming. We said, okay, we want to plug academy students in. So by the time, what year did you come, Greg?
2002.
2. Okay, so by the time Greg got here, we were already plugging kids in, and he helped actually amplify that, and that shot forward. So by 2005, we had him on every board and committee and everything else. So these top 3 actually were our top 3 statements of intent. All the while, we're still working on these things, but it took longer. And then the next year 2, we began working on this number 5 and number 6. We were beginning to, and then we were working for 6 years on this number 7 before we finally got it built. So you have to take them in chunks. Move on to your next statements of intent and then develop strategies and put those in play. So you take only a couple, you can't do all of them at the same time, because if you do, you overwhelm yourself and nothing gets done. But take 1 or 2 and say, this year we're focusing here. And every year, then you review those statements of intent and say, where are we doing well? The way I did that was I would take the statements of intent, the sheet out, and I'd put it in front of the elders and I'd say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, rate each one of these. Where do you think we are? And it's a snapshot of perceptions, that's all it is. But it gives you an idea corporately to say, oh, well, we're at a 7.9 on this one, we're only at a 2.3 on this one. Next year, let's focus on the 2.3 and see if we can bring that up. And so that kind of gives you a way to work that through. And as you drive those things, it continues to move forward. Evaluate once per year with your team. to determine where you're doing well and where you need to do better. Have them give you a score from 1 to 10, and the average of all the scores to come up with your final score. If anything scores below a 5, make sure you have a discussion on it, determine how you'll improve it. And so this is the actionable steps that you can do as you work your way through this whole process of movement. It's great to plan and to say we'd like to do this, but if you never make them actionable and give your statement of intent there, nothing ever moves. And so this is the way you kind of drive that movement and keep the whole bus rolling. Develop your emphasis to the church board or your team based on what your elders consider to be important to your staff, from your statements of intent, not from whatever bee is in their bonnet at the moment. You can chase bees all over the field and waste a whole lot of time and resources. So look at those statements of intent and make that your driving thing. If you can teach them intentionality, it cuts down on the rabbit trail ministry. We do a lot of rabbit trail ministry. We run all over the place because so-and-so has this bee in their bonnet and so-and-so saw a rabbit over here, and we do all that. But if you let the statements of intent, because the statements of intent are tied to your vision and mission, if you let those statements of intent drive things and you score those and you continue to evaluate those and you continue to move on those, everything moves forward instead of a rabbit trail ministry. So recognize your vision statement, statements of intent give you permission to say no to some good things that aren't necessarily the most important thing. It's easy to try to say yes to everybody, but we have limited time, we have limited resources, and if you're saying yes to everybody, you're saying no to everybody. What you're saying is, well, we'll try to do this and this and this and this and this, and pretty soon you're so distracted and you're so distraught that you can't make heads or tails of anything, and so nothing gets done. So this gives you permission to say no. Thank you for your idea. However, the direction we're headed right now is this. And if we don't do this, we're wasting time and resources, and we're spinning our wheels. And so I told my elders we have a superstructure we're building on. 5 things I want to teach kids. I want to teach them how to worship. I want to teach them how to study the Bible. I want to teach them how to find their place inside the church and learn how to serve there. I want to teach them how to find their place in their community and learn how to serve there. And I want to teach them how to have fun in a Christian setting, which means we have to redefine the word fun sometimes. But those 5 things, if it doesn't do one of those 5 things in our statements of intent, if it doesn't do one of those 5 things, as good as an idea as it is, we're saying no. Because we have limited time. So show me how it ties to one of those, and I'll say yes every time. Because we're going to move forward. So that was my superstructure. But it gives you the permission to say no, not just because you don't like that person. Or there always come up these cockamamie ideas, and you're going, oh, brother, here we go again. You can say, well, thank you, but it's not helping us accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. And we have limited time, limited resources to make stuff move. So look for ways to integrate students in the lifeblood of the church, your organization. Obviously, you guys are working with students. Look for ways to challenge students to grow. We don't often do that. Now, when we do honors and Pathfinders, it's a way to challenge growth. However, most of the time, students turn that into a checklist. As long as I get these checked off and signed, I get my patch. And so one of the things you can do is utilize those honors and the pursuit of those honors to actually help develop them and ask them the why questions. Now, why is this important? Or how is this? And make them think a little bit before you just check them off. Look for ways that students and adults can be involved together. I tell my youth staff when I was a youth pastor, the only reason we hold events is an excuse for you to be close to kids and have relationships. Because it's the relationships that's going to carry the day. When they think about Pathfinders, these college students I'm talking to now on college campuses, public university campuses, when they think of Pathfinders, they think of relationships. They think of fun times and the relationships they develop there. They can tell you wild stories about campfires, and they can tell you about how they about caught their tent on fire, and they can tell you all kind of bizarre things, but it's always about, oh, that was such a fun time. Those memories. And it all revolves around relationships. So when you look at that, vision with students in mind. Vision with your kids in mind. How are we going to develop them? How are we going to keep them rolling? Look for ways to encourage adults to mentor a student with similar interests. If you see somebody who has an interest that you have, or one of your staff has, say, hey, have you seen so-and-so? I think it'd really be cool if you came alongside them and you can begin to work that. Vision for church practice change. In other words, look for the practical things that can actually help shift the momentum in your group and build it. While a person may have been an elder for years, this is what I do in churches. I say, you're no longer just an elder. You're not going to be a mentoring elder. You're no longer just a deacon. You're going to be a mentoring deacon. We're going to raise the bar. When I first got here, elders didn't know how to elder and deacons didn't know how to deek. So we had to raise the bar. We had to figure out what that looked like and help them understand that. And that was a whole lot of my first 2 years here, was trying to get them to understand what that really meant. And then we finally got that moving. But move kids to have great spiritual aptitude under their tutelage. If you can have kids get excited about that relationship with that person, then they'll get excited about what that person is excited about. And if that person's excited about Jesus, guess what? That kid gets excited about Jesus. The same would go for every other office in the church, job shifts and practice, same thing in your whole thing. If the wisdom and training hasn't been transferred to the young before the older ones pass on, the church dies. We can lose the church in one generation. And so we've got to intentionally, and Pathfinders is one of the best ways to intentionally transfer leadership. It's intentionally building kids, and they're there for it, especially in those 8 to 10-year-old and 12-year-olds. Once they start 16, 17, 18, they begin to drop off exponentially as they get busier and busier in high school, and then when they get to college, it's pretty much, unless they're just hardcore Pathfinders, which they have those people, and you see them at Oshkosh and Gillette when they're in their 80s. They're hardcore Pathfinders people. But that's not the norm. That's the exception. And so we've got to begin being about this, passing it on to the next generation. So just like the various parts of the body need each other, your vision needs to recognize that your church body has the same needs. The church needs the enthusiasm and energy of the young. The young need the wisdom and encouragement of their elders. Creating a win-win as your vision is your goal. Small changes over time can have a huge impact. And I've got a video. I don't know if you've ever seen how wolves changed Yellowstone Park. Have you seen that one?
Amen.
You like that one?
I took ecology, and the whole thing was like.
You like that? Traumatic?
Yeah, the world was bad when people got rid of wolves.
I don't know if you can hear it because I don't know if I've got it going through the. Is that thing on? I don't know if this is on. Is it?
I don't think he turned the sound on.
Yeah, it says.
Oh, did it say it's on?
Looks like it might be. We'll try it. And the answer is no. But let me see if I can.
Jordan knows it by heart, so.
Yeah.
You want to do it for us?
I've never actually seen this video, but.
You haven't? Oh, it's a cool video, and it just I was going to close with that, and it's really good. But let me go to my system settings here and make sure that the sound is going out to the HDMI. I think that might be the issue. Output, Classroom 7 AirPlay. So there it is. Let's go back to slideshow. Next slide. One more time. See if there's something over here.
Don, you want to do it?
You know how to do it?
Got the sound good?
All right. So it's going from here to the HDMI to there, so it's just a matter of screen being on HDMI 1. So HDMI 1, is that what it's on? The input, I didn't check that. Input, HDMI 1.
Okay, we're finding something to do, so I think you can figure it out.
No, it's not.
Okay, keep going. There you go. Okay, let's try it now. Oh, went the wrong way.
Those slides.
Wrong way, you're ready. One more time.
I'm actually out of it.
You have to go back one more,
Yeah,
then forward again.
Wait,
that's what I'll have to do.
maybe this is a.
Oh.
So I don't know how to help this one.
Sure.
Right?
It says says there's some going on,
What do
but
people
it's
should
just not
consider
coming
when
through.
you're on
Yeah.
against,
Yeah, I
It's
think
coming.
that still has.
A trophic cascade is an ecological process that starts by and tumbles all the way down to the bottom. And the classic example is what happened in Yellowstone National Park in the United States when wolves were reintroduced in 1995. Now, we all know that wolves kill various species of animals, but perhaps we're slightly less aware that they give life to many others. Before the wolves turned up, they'd been absent for 70 years. But the numbers of deer, because there was nothing to hunt them, had built up in the Yellowstone Park, and despite efforts by humans to control them, they managed to reduce much of the vegetation there to almost nothing. They just grazed it away. But as soon as the wolves arrived, even though there were fewer.
What do you think? What's that got to do with Pathfinders? Yeah.
Even the smaller groups that we introduce can help impact the effect of the other groups.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah. Somebody else, what do you think? Yeah.
You get people to think differently, then that's all that matters. Like the wolves got the deer to think differently, so they didn't just sit in one place and eat the ground. So they actually had forward progress.
Now, when they reintroduced the wolves, nobody had any idea that was going to happen.
No.
But they began to notice it was happening, and they began to watch it, and they charted this whole thing, and said, wow, this is amazing that the smaller number, they've changed all of Yellowstone. But that's the way I see Pathfinders. Small in number, they can change the church. I'm not saying the Pathfinders are wolves, don't okay, some of them are. But we won't say any names. And some Pathfinder counselors can be wolves too, but we don't go there. But the fact is that if you take a small group and you focus them and you vision for them, and you get your statements of intent, and you begin to make forward progress, you will see, little by little, change that takes place. It's not going to be fast. If you think fast, the change is going to be fast, it never will be. That's why I say to change the culture of the GCA church, it took us 6 years to really get to where we were comfortable with where we were at. And then it has just now, it's expanded since then, and just we've grown on top of that, and there's a whole lot more stuff going on. And that's why GCA Church is such a special place. Because we took a small number, 21 giving units, that bought into a vision, and we began to work that very, very hard, and pray our way through it, and be intentional about setting those statements of intent, the goals, the actionable things, and we watch things move. We watch things change little by little. And now it's unrecognizable to the way it was before. And so as you look at leading kids in Pathfinders, I would suggest that you take those organizations that you're leading and say, okay, what is it God is calling us to do? Start with prayer, as we said at the beginning. Pray your way through it, and try to capture God's vision. So how is your club unique from all the others? The blank Pathfinder Club exists to blank. And work your way through that entire process. And I think that as you do that, in 3, 4, 5 years, you'll see marked change. You'll see great progress, drastic movement, that when you look back, you can see it. Going through it, it seems like it's just microcosm. It's just barely moving. But God will change it, and God will move it along. So, questions before we close? I don't know if that's what you wanted or not, Ron.
Oh, that's perfect. I just wish we had now an hour for Heidi as a Pathfinder leader to help these Master Guide pledges here to understand how to vision this thing and develop a
Let's
vision
do
for
a staff
the...
meeting right now.
Yeah, that's right. Let's put this into action.
Well, Heidi
Uh-huh.
just happened to have a sheet that you can revisit
That's great.
later on with all those steps on there.